KTN News.
And now Deputy President William Ruto has defended his bottom-up economic model, saying it is aimed at empowering the weak in society. Ruto says those opposed to the model are not yet versed with it and should stop trivializing it. This as Amani National Congress Party leader Musalia Mudavadi and his Ford Kenya counterpart Moses Wetangula faulted the model, saying it cannot address the country's current economic problems. Here's Alan Ochanda with more details.
In a bid to endear himself to the electorate, Deputy President William Ruto has been selling his economic recovery blueprint, dangling the carrot to the lowly in the society, whom he has promised to be at the bottom of the economic pyramid, thus holding more stakes should he be elected as the country's next president. Addressing worshippers at a church service in Nairobi, Ruto reiterated that his bottom-up approach aims at economically empowering the downtrodden. ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi and his Ford Kenya counterpart Moses Wetangula, however, poking holes in the model, terming it as theoretic and not addressing specifics.
Kuna mjadala mkubwa Kenya sasa ya bottom up. Pengine mnashangaa hii bottom up inaanzia wapi? Hii bottom na inasumbua watu, imesumbua watu wengi sana. Watu wamechanganyikiwa vibaya sana na hii bottom up. Lakini to explain, it is about remembering the weak.
Watu wamekuwa wakizungumza sana kusema iko model hii, model hii, model hii. Mimi nataka niseme hakuna haja ya model. Model ni kama uko kwa classroom unafunza maprofesa, unatoa model na theory. Kila watu wanataka kujua kama kuna deni, tutalipa deni namna gani? Kama kuna ushuru, tutafanya nini huo ushuru upunguke?
Liberalized economy ni nchi serikali kuweka enabling environment na kuachia wananchi kufanya mambo yao. Hakuna economy ya kupeana watu pesa kiholela vile mnaambia, kwa sababu wakisema hivyo itakuwa tu kama zile laptops, itakuwa tu kama zile 9 stadiums, itakuwa tu kama zile vitu zote mliambiwa na hazikufanyika.
Those opposed to Ruto's approach have insisted that what the country needs is good infrastructure and favorable policies to better the lives of Kenyans. But proponents of Ruto's model say the current system only benefits a few people who are at the top of the food chain.
That is the lifting of everybody so that we can together be in a nation where nobody is left behind.
Let us identify, recognize the issue, and then have proper policy interventions on that issue na turekebishe na tusonge mbele.
A few weeks ago, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga outlined his economic vision to make Kenya the African continent's headquarters for global business. Raila's macroeconomic vision varied from the DP's bottom-up approach, which focuses on the microeconomic aspect, but the latter says he will not shy away from his model. Alan Ochanda, KTN News.
Thank you very much for that update. And the conversation about the economic model that would work for the country has had tongues wagging across the nation for the past few weeks. And of course, we're going to dig deeper into that conversation and work our way back to our top story. Let's start with that. And with me in studio is a lawyer and political pundit, Jack Okula, as well as political analyst Muthiora Kariaka, who is joining us via our live from our I&M studio. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning on News Center. Now, what's your take on all this back and forth? And is the Deputy President right that those who are criticizing the approach he is for with regards to the economy just don't understand it and for political reasons are trivializing it? I'll start with you, Mr. Okula.
Thank you so much. Foremost, the Deputy President or his allies have never explained what bottom-up approach means. I suspect it would mean that you have money with people who are down here and they can work their way up. And I remember him yesterday as he was speaking, he was quoting the Holy Writ and at Psalm 113 from 6 to 7. That typically says that the poor people shall be at the table with the princes and the prince. So that is what is talking about, that his administration will be able to give money to the people who are in informal sector, the people who are jobless, people who have no economic prowess, and then they are able to rise using these monies that they have been given.
Right.
Now, when you talk about this model, and again, Kenyans have a right to question what exactly this model means and what it portends to our economy and to the people of Kenya, because it has not been explained to them in detail. Yes. They are simply saying that we are going to give money. The question is whether these monies, are they going to print money and give out? Are they going to give these monies in a loan, or are they able to give this money? Are they going to take it from the exchequer and probably just give it to Kenyans? Those are some of the questions that the Kenyans are still asking. Yeah. Given they are able to explain a few things, that the gap between the rich and the poor in this country is too high, and they want to fill in this gap, and the only way to fill in this gap is to make sure that ordinary Kenyans who may not necessarily be privileged enough to have money in their pockets, in their bank accounts, are able to access these monies. Yeah. Now, there are several ways of accessing funds. One, you could take a loan. One, the government may decide to give certain. But so it is true that Kenyans, including the people at the peak, people who even understand economy, may not necessarily understand what this bottom-up approach is. Yes. Because it has not been explained. So, yes, as to whether we are able to criticize it, you only criticize what you understand. To date, we have not been able to understand it. I believe that it is going to be a good approach. It is a good approach to the extent that, yes, we need to bridge that gap between the haves and the haves not. As to how is what they need to explain to us so that we understand it and comprehend it fully and be able to either join the bandwagon and or criticize it depending on what explanation they are proffered in that so-called bottom-up model
approach. Yeah. Now, Mr. Carriera, well, when you hear sentiments that the poor shall be dining with the kings, it all sounds noble. Do you agree with the assertion by Mr. Okula that it is actually the how that is of concern to many? People want to understand how this is going to happen, and understandably so.
Well, that the poor will dine with the mighty and the kings needs to be qualified in the sense that you will dine with the mighty and with kings because you have a gift. There is something you're bringing to the table. It's not just an offertory. It's not a favor being extended to you. Now, allow me to borrow Deputy President's words when he said about the bottom-up approach, that at the end he concluded, inawachanganya sana. Yes, indeed, it's true that those who are supposed to be the policy makers and the policy implementers have not internalized what the bottom-up model is all about in the Kenyan context. And therein lies the tragedy, because truth be told, if you want to know a person's mind, you listen to their words. But if you want to know what is in their heart, look at their actions. The people pushing the bottom-up model have been in government now for almost 10 years. It's actually going to be 10 years next week. 9 years next week. And the same things they are promising now, christened as bottom-up, were promised but have not been delivered to date. Now, they're not going, of course, to follow through with action. You can see from their efforts at explaining what it is that they seek to do for the Kenyan common person. Today, if you look at the financial news, you realize that our country has been pushed to a corner by the lenders from China, who have insisted that if we do not pay up by June, because we were seeking an extension of the debt relief to December, they're not going to disburse funds for the projects that are currently ongoing. What we need is to address the current elephant in the room, which is that we have a cash crunch. We are not able to meet our debt obligations. And if we mean well for the Kenyan people, we need to get our fiscal act together, and that does not include getting money and giving it to people like has been suggested by those pushing the bottom-up model. If you look at the financial sector in Kenya, it's fairly well developed. You walk out of your house and you have a bank at your doorstep. If we want to increase access to capital, we should not look to reinvent the wheel by coming up with these very lofty terms about bottom-up. We can use the current infrastructure that is already set up. What we need to do is to push the government out of the local borrowing sector. We look for those concessionary loans out there that are affordable and cheap, and ensure that the banks that we have are able to fund businesses, because we know that our environment, the business environment, is purely pushed by the informal sector. So what the government needs to do is to make sure that Kenyans are not taken for a ride. They need to sponsor political education so that we are not duped again and go on promises that will never be delivered.
The deputy president, that some of those allied to him don't even seem to understand it. But even though he has been vocal, trying to explain that this current situation right now, we're hoping that the goodies, the riches, the economic well-being trickles down to grassroots, is not working because of cartels. And now he's hoping to go down to the bottom and build it up. So when you are having people behind in your camp not entirely understanding or communicating it in the right way, what does that do to the messaging?
What it means is that it is an elitist approach that is not understood by Kenyans, and foremost, but even the people that are following the deputy president.
Yes.
So that if you want to message if you want to have a political message, it needs to come from you as the leader of that potential administration. It trickles down to the people who are your allies and possibly the people of Kenya. I suspect that the deputy president has in his tray certain economists who are trying to give certain message to him or trying to develop a model for him. What these economists may not necessarily have explained to the people around the deputy president what this model is all about. Because as my brother says, we are at a situation where our debt is almost 8 trillion, 7+ trillion. When you perchance the deputy president were to become the president in the year 2022, these are debts that is going to borrow, because you cannot say that these debts have been acquired by Jubilee administration, so they are not going to the older administration. Government is perpetual in nature. So the first thing that you would want to do is to pay off this debt.
Yes.
And when you're paying off this debt, some of these debts, they are really hard to, they are really exorbitant in terms of interest rates and so on. So then you need to borrow again to offset your balances in the budget. And most times what the government does is that if they are not able to borrow internationally, then they come to the commercial banks to borrow.
Yeah.
What does to the Kenyan people is that the Kenyan people are not able to borrow from the commercial banks. And when these people in the informal sector, whatever it is they are doing, I think what needs to be done to them is that someone needs to come out and probably rally them to be formally engaged. If, for instance, you are in the Juakali sector, then that needs to be registered, whether it is a company or it is a partnership or it's a cooperative, if it's a SACCO, then that registration, in fact, that incorporation would now allow commercial banks to recognize you in a way, and then you can be given a loan. But that also depends on whether the Kenyan government is also borrowing from the commercial bank. So I quite agree that the first step would be for the Kenyan government to really be reluctant and to shy away from borrowing locally. And if they don't borrow locally, it means that the loans that are with our commercial banks are now available to Kenyans, and the Kenyans can now go and borrow. You cannot just walk into a bank and start borrowing. First of all, you have to show your credit worthiness. You have to show that you have been organized in certain setup, whether it is a company, a limited liability company, whether it is a SACCO, whether it is a partnership, or whatever business it is. But most Kenyans in the informal sector may not have registered themselves into such, and therefore cannot be recognized. So I think in their bottom-up model, the first question that they need to address is whether they are trying to rally Kenyans in the informal sector to be registered and to be recognized as business entities that can access certain facilities in banks. Because it would be some kind of foolery to Kenyans to tell them that we are going to get money from the treasury and to give you interest free so that you start a business with. And I understand Sakaja, who being a statistician, was talking about 22 million Kenyans being given 100,000. When you do that, you have over 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings that you cannot give to Kenyans, because if our budget is 3 trillion and then you already given 2.2 in your bottom-up economic model, what are you remaining with from your budget? Remember, even the 3 trillion, even our collection taxes, our revenue may not even go beyond 1.8 trillion. And then even if you were to give them certain small monies, like, there are 22 million of them, you end up giving them hundreds of shillings. And these hundreds of shillings, what can they do with this 100 of shillings? So the first duty for the deputy president is to come out, tell his allies, and tell Kenyans who need to understand this model, what is in it for Kenyans, so they are able to comprehend it fully, so they are able to make informed choices and decisions based on the messaging that they have given out there to Kenyans.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we shall be digging deeper into this conversation about the economy. We shall also be having our reporters stationed across the nation telling us or bring us the very latest on the Form 1 enrollment that is ongoing. Not enrollment, but getting back to school. The students are getting back to school. It's an unusual school calendar, and we shall be getting you all caught up on the activities that are happening in schools across the nation. So do stay tuned for that, and of course conversations on the state of politics in the country and more. We'll take a short break.